When a man calling himself Luis Miguel Martinez bought a $1.2 million home in the LA suburb of Riverside in 2023, he brought standard luxuries. Parked outside was a BMW and another luxury car with Mexican license plates from Mexico.
He faked his own death, but was living right here in Southern California. Now a high-ranking leader of a Mexican tribe has been arrested. The DOJ says Christian Fernando Gutierrez Ochoa was found in Riverside, where he'd been living using a fake name and living a life of luxury, according to prosecutors. The 37-year-old is the son-in-law to fugitive cartel boss El Mencho, seen in this wanted poster. Gutierrez Ochoa accused of drug trafficking, money laundering, and kidnapping. DOJ says his arrest weakens the Jalisco, one of the world's most violent drug trafficking organizations.
But this week he was snatched up by the feds, who said that Martinez, that wasn't his real name. His real name is Christian Fernando Gutierrez Ochoa, and he's the son-in-law of the supposedly most wanted Nazarco in Mexico, El Mencho, a.k.a. El Mencho. He was a high-ranking member. He went missing in December of 2022, and he was declared deceased. And in fact, feds picked up wiretap stuff from Jalisco New Generation saying that this guy was deceased. And it makes you think about I'm sure that many narcos from down there that are dead ain't dead. They're living somewhere under a different name. They've just left. This guy was a key plug in the growth of the CJNG. He married one of El Mencho's daughters. One of El Mencho's other daughters just got let out of prison for when she showed up at her brother's federal court hearing.
Judy, this is the story of like father, like son. The men oversee Mexico's most feared new generation. Ruben Gonzalez, the 28-year-old known as Menchito, finally extradited from Mexico, and tonight is being held without bond on drug trafficking and machine gun charges.
But he's married to a different daughter who owns a coffee shop in Riverside. So when you ask, are those people on this side of the border? Well, they are. Not probably the most violent people, though some of them pop up over here, but the ones with money, why wouldn't you come live on this side? And you can blend right in. The metro LA areas, depending how you define LA, is 20-some million people, or at least 18, 19 million people. You can blend right in. Now, this guy, Gutierrez Ochoa, he was under indictment for helping orchestrate 40,000 bricks of METHOD man and another 2,000 bricks of Coca-Cola. So that's CJNG's, one of their specialties is the synthetics, and he's indicted for 40,000 bricks of the METHOD man. He did some other wilder stuff. So like I said, he's married to El Mencho's youngest daughter, owns a coffee shop in Riverside. Her mother, El Mencho's wife, has been in custody for some time. They're picking off El Mencho's family. His daughter just did a couple years. His son, who we'll get to in a second, is probably about to get life. His wife's in custody. So when his wife got taken into custody, this guy who they found in Riverside, he kidnapped two members of the Mexican Navy and was trying to trade them for his mother-in-law. So a DEA confidential informant told the DEA, and like I said, there was some wiretap stuff saying that he had been by Mencho for messing some stuff up. So the use of propaganda, of disinformation, they're very good at that. So to repeat, they had a DEA informant who sounds like a double agent, or they knew that this guy was informing. So this is the danger of informants. You really don't know what their agenda is. They're often lying, or they could be in the case of high-level operators, they could be double agents who come and present themselves as wanting to be informants, and they give false information. So this DEA informant told the DEA that Mencho had bumped off his son-in-law. And Mencho himself has famously been using probably a propaganda ploy, disinformation, for some years now, planning stories that he was sickly, he had his own hospital built for him in the jungle, maybe that he was deceased. There's some information that the DEA got said that certain commands and letters that came from El Mencho to certain of his underlings, suddenly the handwriting changed, which is indicative of him not being alive. Or is it indicative of a campaign to make it seem like he's not alive? The U.S. and Mexican governments never have declared him dead, but in this case, I guess they had assumed this guy was deceased because the informant told him that Mencho had bumped his son-in-law off. There was an indictment in 2022 against Mencho, so he has a $10 million reward waiting on him. His daughter, like I said, just got out of prison for doing a couple years. She was in charge of the money laundering. She had a chain of sushi restaurants. She also had a tequila company. There's a lot of tequila companies in LA, boy, let me tell you. And speaking of tequila companies, the mansion in Riverside that this guy bought, this guy was living in, it was bought by a tequila company, Pasión Azul, for $1.2 million in cash. So that probably triggered the feds looking at it. But it was through a business, and if the business has money floating through it, it probably took them time to unravel it. Photos floating around of the guy named Martinez, and I used some software to match it against a guy named Gutierrez Ochoa and found out, oh shit, that's him. So pretty interesting. The Mexican criminal elite are living amongst us, at least here in Southern California. Did a story a while back about a guy named El Mago that lost his life in an argument at a New Year's Eve party. He was a big hitter. He owned the Benny Hibachi trucks in downtown LA. So what's going on with CJNG? Is the noose tightening? Well, Mencho's son, Menchito, who's been in custody since 2014, he was picked up in Mexico. He was let out of jail. He was put back in jail in Mexico, and he was finally extradited to the U.S. in 2020. Now listen to this Godfather-esque scene. Do you remember in Godfather 2 when the guy, one of the capos was going to testify against the Corleone family in congressional trials. He was in witness protection. And Tom Hagen goes to visit him, right? And then he takes a hot bath and opens his wrists up, and right? So he was going to inform, and then he gets a visit from the family lawyer, Tom Hagen, and he changes his tune. In Godfather 2, he took himself out. Well, Mencho's son, maybe 6 months ago, was set to plead guilty and be sentenced, and there had been a order entered into the court docket that he had changed his plea to guilty. Chapo's trial some years back, as we know, El Mayo's son testified against Chapo. Vicentillo is out now. He served about 11 years. The Flores twins. All these huge people cut deals and told and did 10, 11 years and got out. So possibly that's what Mencho's son was going to do. But Mencho was at a court date, maybe, I don't think it was the actual sentencing, but it was getting close to sentencing. And this lawyer pops up that was sent by unknown family members of him. And he suddenly took back his guilty plea. So what does that sound like? Sounds like maybe he cut some type of deal. They weren't going to give him life because all these guys have all life offenses. Mencho's son was involved in shooting down like a U.S. helicopter with a rocket launcher, like crazy stuff, in addition to orchestrating, massive loads coming across the border. So him entering a guilty plea and getting any type of deal would probably, be given some info. He said so this lawyer shows up at his family sins and he takes back his deal. So now he's going to trial. And if he loses a trial, which seems like he most certainly will, he'll get life. What could his own father be holding over his head? I mean, at that level, hey man, watch Game of Thrones. At that level, they'll bump off. Did he tell his son? Did the lawyer tell his son your dad's gonna knock off your wife and kids if you testify? Who knows? Or just water, folks. Or is what Mencho said in court true, where he said, well, now that I got this lawyer, I don't like the plea, I want to reconsider it, and now he's pushing to go to trial to try to get the feds to give him a better deal. That's certainly possible, so we'll see. And as for Mencho's wife, she's looking at heavy time. So this is the way they get to you. If they can't get you, they do it on a smaller scale here in the U.S. for all you guys. It's getting a couple dollars. When you get your aunt or your mother or your girlfriend to get a car in her name or something for you, if they come for you, then all you've done, you haven't protected yourself. You've actually given the feds a leverage over you, because there's now a woman who you should cared about, your mother, aunt, girlfriend, whatever in the scenario I'm making up, who they can pull in and say, listen, you work as whatever, you're a nurse or a teacher, or you don't work, and your tax return said you made $18,000 or $31,000, and you bought a $100,000 car. We know you did it for your nephew or your boyfriend, so that's a straw purchase, and we can give you 24 months or whatever, 12 months in the feds. And her lawyer is going to say, no, you're going to get the time because you're guilty. And then things like that are what make guys plead guilty often, where they'll say, well, we're not going to cut you a deal, but we'll let your mother and your wife out of the case, or your best friend or your little brother or whatever. So they're doing that on a high level with Mencho. One of his daughters, they just found his son-in-law hiding in plain sight here in L.A. His son is about to be looking at life, and the noose may be closing. And interesting that now, remember who's in custody and who's telling. One of Chapo's sons showed up on an airplane with El Mayo some months back. And who knows, I'm sure they're a treasure trove of information. And I think that some deals are attempting to be cut. They're gonna, we are seeing somewhat of a decline in ODs from Fetty. Now, is that because people are using it less? There's more Narcan, there's more awareness? Maybe. Is it because there's less of it coming? Well, that's what Chapo's sons claim, and they may be trying to cut a deal where they trim down on the production. The good old days of just coke and dope, CNH, there were way fewer overdoses back when those were the two hard drugs. METH and Fetty Wap, KILL, a whole lot more people. So they may be cutting a deal of like, well, we'll slow those things coming in, and you give some of us some sweet deals. So this guy who got caught in Riverside, Mencho's son-in-law, whose wife, Mencho's daughter, owns a coffee shop in Riverside. Fred, you ever had coffee at Mencho's daughter's coffee shop in Riverside? I know you like your coffee. My buddy gets coffee in Riverside. So there's an update on what's going on, and the people who used to be just on the other side of the border, but some are on this side of the border, hiding in plain sight. El Prophet, American Dope, Viva las Drogas.